Hello and welcome to another off-the-shelf board game review. Today we're going to look at Super Dungeon Explorer. Now don't let the images fool you. Super Dungeon Explorer is not a dungeon crawling game. It is a miniatures game with a very nice fantasy theme. Super Dungeon Explorer is a miniatures game that plays for 2 to 6 players. It's going to play anywhere from 30 minutes all the way up to 3 hours depending on how big of a skirmish level board you want to create and play through in this fantasy-based skirmish miniatures game. Super Dungeon Explorer has a very strong video game theme or vibe, almost paying homage to classic Super Nintendo games like Secret of Mana or even Zelda or Link or some of the classic games we all played back in the late 80s, early 90s on our Super Nintendo entertainment systems. You'll see the homage to the video games throughout the gameplay of this game, from the loot tracking board, which uses things such as 8-bit, 16-bit, and Super, to enemies that pop potions out of them when they're defeated, or hearts for anybody in the heroic party to pick up and use for the benefit of the party. In Super Dungeon Explorer, one person is going to take the role of the console, which controls all the bad guys in this game. The other players are going to split up the heroes, and the board is going to be put together, and they're going to go on a little bit of an adventure trying to defeat the console to win the game. Now, victory in this game is actually pretty simple. To win as the heroes, you simply defeat the final boss for the dungeon, while the console, their only objective is to wipe out all the heroes to win the game. Super Dungeon Explorer is played on a square-based board that's going to be created at the beginning of each game. Now the size of the board is going to be anywhere from 2 to 5 of these boards depending on how big of a game you want and how long you want to play. The standard introductory game uses 2 of these boards and plays anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, whereas a monstrous melee between the console and the heroes using all 5 boards can take up to 3 hours. The objective of the game is for the heroes to wipe out the final boss of the dungeon and to win the game. Now if the bad guys are able to defeat all the heroes, the console is actually going to win the game. Of course, it's not that simple though, because the boss doesn't actually start the game on the board. The game starts with a whole bunch of these spawning points. Think of classic games such as Gauntlet, where minor minions are going to come out on the board. Now the heroes are going to spawn the final bad guy by causing mayhem and destruction, or by destroying all these spawn points and forcing the boss to come out onto the board. Once that happens, there's going to be a grand battle between the heroes and the boss of the dungeon. If the boss of the dungeon is able to defeat all the heroes, the bad guys are going to win, and if the heroes manage to defeat the boss, no matter how many guys are left on the board, there'll be lots of minions left on the board. If those heroes can take out that final boss, the heroes do win. Of course, it wouldn't be a proper homage to classic 16-bit era video games if it didn't have tons of stats effects for all the party, the heroes and the bad guys to suffer. Lots of loot to pop up all over the place. Treasure in treasure chests. And of course, lots of dice to perform combat with. And of course, since there's more of an homage to video games, dice are going to give people hearts and potions to use special abilities. Super Dungeon Explorer, again, it's not a dungeon crawl. There is no grand theme behind this game. There's no overarching story or anything. This is a traditional bad guys versus good guys miniatures game that actually does a very tricky thing that makes you form your party, but you don't actually use points like a standard miniature style game. I'll show you how it all works. But before I show you how everything works, I'm going to take a moment to show you all the components you get in the box. The Super Dungeon Explorer retails for $100, and for $100 you're actually getting quite a bit of components inside the box. You're getting 45 finely detailed miniatures. You're getting almost 100 full color artwork cards. The game comes with 5 double-sided dungeon tiles to create the dungeon for the encounter, approximately 200 tokens used for the various status effects, 18 engraved dice, and they are the standard size dice, and one 30-page rulebook. Go ahead and start with the rulebook that comes with the game. Now the rulebook is 31 pages long, and while it does include a lot of artwork and diagrams on how to play the game, the problem with the rulebook is that it's already got enough errata to fill up 15 pages of corrections for this rulebook. Now this rulebook is decent to give you a rough idea of how to play the game, but if you're learning how to play the game from scratch, I would ignore this rulebook. Go over to a website such as BoardGameGeek.com or even Soda Pop Miniatures website once they have the full version released that has the 1.5 rule set for this game. It's going to save you a lot of headaches, and it's also going to clear up a lot of the discrepancies that come with the basic rulebook for the game. And next we got the miniatures. Now I'm going to pre-warn you on these miniatures. This is a hobbyist miniature game. That means that these miniatures need to be assembled before you play this game. This is not the kind of game you're going to bring home, open up the box. If you know how to play, you're going to start playing. These miniatures come in pieces, and when I say pieces, I'm talking about little pieces. There are lots of small parts you're going to be building for these miniatures. These are super deformed style of miniatures, which means big head, little body. And you're going to be putting together the arms, the bows, the wings, the heads for some of these pieces. Some of them you'll need to put the staves together. It's going to be about a good 3 to 4 hour project depending on how experienced you are at building miniatures. Now the upside to this is that these are actually some very fantastic miniatures. They have a lot of high detail on them. They look really great once they're put together, and once you paint these miniatures they look even better. You can look and see that there's some very good detail on the eyes. You see the tusks, you see the chain around him, the individual knuckles, the wraps on his armor. Very, very fine details on the big guys, and even the little guys have a lot of very fine detail. You look at the Dragon Priest, you see his staff is like got a skeleton head on it. You see his teeth, you see his individual eyes, the individual folds of his cloak, this pouch on his belt. A lot of very nice details. And once you have these miniatures based, and these miniatures are all based, that's why they have a very shiny red to them. They've all been based. The standard color is this more of this off reddish color. But once you paint these miniatures up, you see that they look even better. They have a lot of very fine details in them for the eyes, the mouths, the hands. These miniatures look really, really good once they're painted up. Add a lot of very fine detail, and they look really, really good. And I'm not a very good painter, at least I don't think I am. And this is about an hour and a half worth of work per miniature. And you see that even with my admittedly mediocre skills, these miniatures actually look really good. Just going to take a moment to show you a couple of them, show you what they look like when they're painted. And again, you can see a lot of details in these guys. I'm not going to show you all of them, but just show you a couple of them so you get a rough idea of what they look like when they're done. Again, they're the super deformed styles, so the head's going to be rather large and the bodies are going to be a lot smaller. So most of the detail is going to be in the heads and the face, the eyes. Not as much details when you get down to the feet or the hands, but there's going to be a lot of really cool details on them. It makes them look really nice. Miniatures, they're the hard plastic, so they can hold the very nice details, and these miniatures look fantastic, painted or unpainted. They just look really, really nice once they're painted up. Show you one final one, what they look like when they're painted up. Just spin around, give you a quick idea of what the details are. Again, really good job on these miniatures. The miniatures are alone, just because of high quality, are almost worth the price of admission for the game. And while I say that, you may be thinking that 45 miniatures for $100 is not a fantastic deal. You have to understand that there is a large variety of sculpts in this game. There's 9 different sculpts just for the heroes. And on the bad guys team, you have 5 different sculpts just for the kobolds. You have 3 different sculpts just for the dragon minions. You have 2 different sculpts for the spawners, where the bad guys come out of. And you have 2 different sculpts for the mini boss and the boss, creating a very large variety, making a very, very nice set of miniatures, especially for $100. Next we have the cards for the game. Now the cards are not the thickest quality. I went through, this is one of the few games I actually sleeve because these cards are very thin. Go and pull one out for you and just show you. These are very flimsy, very bendable. They're a thin card stock. Not the best at all, and with miniatures games, especially with ones where you're going to be handling the stat cards quite a bit, it's probably a good idea just go ahead and buy a whole bunch of sleeves for these cards and just make your life a lot easier. Again, there's artwork on all the cards for the heroes. There's also text and pictures on the back for them. Same thing for all the villains. They all come with artwork on them, and it's also going to help if you're trying to paint these. It gives you a good idea of rough paint schemes you can use for all these guys when you paint them up. There's also loot cards. Again, these all have pictures on them. All the cards in the game have pictures on them, and the artwork is really good on them. There's not much text on these cards, just bonuses. This is like one blue die. That one's one red die. Pretty easy stuff to understand, but again, cards, all of them have artwork on them. They all look really, really nice. And the final ones are the treasure cards. You'll see the art looks even better on these treasure cards. Next, we got the cardboard tokens that come with the game. This game comes with a lot of cardboard tokens. They all have individual artwork on them for the various status effects that are going to affect the heroes and the console's villains. There are, I believe, 14 different pieces of artwork on these cards. Everything from a flaming skull to a bomb. Most of it is very high fantasy, kind of cartoony stuff. Nothing overly graphic. It's pretty cool stuff. Lots and lots of these tokens that come with the game, though. The cardstock used on them is good. It's not thin, papery, or anything like that. It's actually pretty good cardstock. They're thick. I haven't had any problems with them peeling or losing the art on them. The art's on both sides. They're very good. They've lasted me. I've had this game for about 18 months now. Lots of plays. I never had any of those fall apart on me or start losing the peeling or falling apart at all. Next, we have the dice. The game does come with 18 dice. They come in 3 different colors, and there is a reason for that, and we'll get into that when I explain the game. Just know that the dice are all engraved, so they are going to last a while. You don't have to worry about the images rubbing off them, which is important because you notice that they have stars, hearts, and potion bottles on them, and those have various effects during the gameplay. They're standard sized dice, and like I said, I've had this game for almost 18 months, and you see that they're starting to lose some of their ink, barely, but this game's gone through a lot of plays, so I'm surprised I haven't had any more problems with that. But standard sized dice, they're plastic, pretty decent quality on those. And finally, we come to the cardboard tiles for the game. I'm going to put this off to the side for a second because I want to talk about that in a moment, but first I want to show you the dungeon tiles that are used to build the dungeon board. Every one of these tiles is double-sided. They all have artwork on them, and as a nice little touch just to show the homage to the video games, you look right here, we have an old school arcade cabinet right in the center of the board. Kind of a cool little touch. There is a lava type of scenario type of board, and there's this, I kind of call it like a graveyard. One side shows a temple-ish type place, the other side is kind of a graveyard. I guess that's not a good description. There's crystals and everything like that, but you'll see there's bones and various things like that, but they all look different, so you can create a very unique board. Makes it, kind of adds to the replay value there, makes it a little more fun, and also adds to the strategy of the game. Finally, we do have the loot meter, and this is thick cardboard, but you're going to see that this board is actually warping pretty badly. The 5 boards for the game board have never warped on me, but this one, pretty much since the second day I opened up the box, has started to warp pretty badly. If you push down on one end, you can see how far it stands up. So this one is actually warped up probably a good inch or inch and a half kind of warp on it. I've tried the book tricks, I've tried various things. This is the best I've ever gotten it to be. Luckily the game board doesn't have any warping on it, but this loot board has warped pretty badly on me. But otherwise, the cardboard has lasted really, really well in this game. And I think if I hold it just like that, you can see, and there's a good warp to it. The components for this game are really good. It's hard to ignore the fact that the cardstock used for the cards is thin cardstock. It can be remedied with sleeves. I hate to say that because I'm not a supporter of sleeves. I don't think you should have to buy sleeves just to make a substandard component last for a while. So the cardstock on the sleeves isn't that good. I had one board that's warping, but luckily it's not a main board that the game is going to be played on, so not a big deal. The miniatures, though, are fantastic that come with this game. They're very highly detailed. They're fun to paint, and when you paint them up, they actually look really, really fantastic. They really add to the replay and the enjoyment of the game. Overall, quality of the components is really good. For $100 with a variety of the sculpts that come with the game, I think you're getting a pretty decent deal, especially since I've seen this game cheaper at online retailers, so you can probably get it for $75. Component-wise, pretty decent, but just understand that there are a few snags with the components, from the not-so-good rulebook, from the potential to the warping of the boards, and also to the thinness of the cardstock. Beyond that, though, the components that come with the game are very top-notch. The Super Dungeon Explorer is a pretty standard miniatures-based game. It's played on a board that's broken up into squares. And those squares can be used for determining movement and range. Each model in the game is going to come with a statistic card. That's going to give them the abilities and things you're going to roll for any time doing a statistic check. Pretty standard stuff for any kind of miniature game. There are a couple unusual rules in the game though, and while at first they may seem strange to you, if you remember this game is designed to feel like a old generation 16-bit video game from the Super Nintendo era, you're going to realize that a lot of those rules actually make much more sense. So keep in mind this game is trying to replicate a 16-bit video game, and a lot of things are going to make a lot more sense to you. Before I start explaining the statistic cards, though, I want to explain to you the dice that come with the game, because they offer a little bit of unique gameplay and they may cause the most confusion in the beginning. The game does come with a lot of dice. They're going to come in 3 colors. They're going to be blue dice, red dice, and green dice. And each die is going to have a certain amount of stars on it. The blue die is considered the weakest die because it only can generate 1 or 2 stars. The red die is the medium die, which can generate anywhere from 1 to 3 stars. And finally the green die is the strongest, which can generate anywhere from 1 star all the way up to 4 stars. Additionally, the dice can also generate stuff like the blue die can generate hearts, the red die can generate potions, and the green die can generate hearts and potions. Now the way any kind of combat works in this game is you're going to roll a certain amount of dice depending on your character or the hero or the model you're using. It's going to tell you either roll a couple blue dice, a couple red dice, a couple green dice, or a combination of any of those dice. When the game tells you to roll those dice, you're simply going to take all the dice it tells you to roll, add up all the stars from your roll, and that's going to be your total. For example, if I was told to roll 3 blue dice, 1 red dice, and I got 3 stars and 1 potion, my total would be 3 stars. Now your target is going to roll some dice to see if your attack was successful. Maybe they get a green die for defense. The way it works is you're going to compare the amount of stars each party rolled. Whoever gets the most stars is going to win the contest of the dice. So if the attacker got 3 stars and the defender got 4 stars, the defender is going to win and not going to take any damage. Whereas opposed if the defender only rolled 1 star and the attacker rolled 3 stars, the attacker would have succeeded with their attack. Now anytime you are a hero, and this goes for the heroes only, not for the bad guys. If you're a hero and you make a successful attack that is not blocked by your opponent by rolling up stars, if you roll a potion, you will get 1 potion. If you roll a heart, you'll get a heart. And if you roll the heart and potion symbol, you're going to get 1 heart and 1 potion. And do note that there is no limit. You can actually roll multiple hearts and also roll multiple potions. And as long as your attack hit and did at least 1 point of damage, you're going to get that many hearts and that many potions. The trick to this is only heroes can get hearts and potions. If you are the console, which is the bad guy, the person controls all the bad guys, not the heroes, but the console, and if you roll hearts or potions, that is considered a blank and you do not get any stars, so it is basically a wasted roll. Unless you're using the newest version of the rules, the 1.5 version of the rules that come with the game, and they are available on the internet now. And the newest version of the rules do state that if you are the console player and you're rolling for either the dungeon boss or the dungeon mini boss, any heart or potion you roll can be used to remove status effects on that miniature. And again, that's only for a boss or mini boss. Normal minions do not get any benefits from hearts or potions at all. Bosses and mini bosses can use hearts and potions to remove status effects from that miniature. So just remember the newest version of the rules. A boss or a mini boss can use a potion or a heart to remove status effects only. They cannot use them to heal hearts, as only remove status effects such as fire, weakness, cold, etc. The other unique thing that Super Dungeon Explorer adds to the miniatures genre is the Adventure Tracker Board. The Adventure Tracker board is going to be used every time you play the game, and there's going to be two very important tracks on it. There's a loot track for the heroes, and then there's the power meter that goes across for the console player. And the way this works is the loot meter is going to track every time the heroes do at least 1 point of damage to a model in the game. And it only advances when the heroes do a point of damage. It's not every time they try to hit, it's every time they successfully do at least 1 point of damage. Every time they do 1 point of damage, the loot tracker is going to advance, and every time it reaches one of these spots that says loot on it, the heroes are going to get to draw a card from the loot deck, and they're going to be able to add this loot card to one of their heroes. Alternately, they can also use these loot cards if they don't want to give it to a hero. They can trade one of these in for the same effect as a heart, or if they grab a treasure card, they can turn this in. Instead of using this and equipping it, they can turn it into a potion immediately. The other tracker that is going to be on the board is the power gauge, and the power gauge is going to go around the outside of the track, and this is going to go up 1 point anytime any model does 1 point of damage to an opposing model. So remember, the major difference is the hero track is only when the heroes do a point of damage, it's going to advance 1 level. The power meter is any time one model does a point of damage to another model on the board. And this is going to advance 1 point every time a model takes a point of damage. You're going to see a couple numbers on here. You're going to see 8-bit, 16-bit, and super. And that's going to judge what kind of models the console player can put into play. Your standard weak creatures, such as the Wyrmling, are an 8-bit model, and you see right on the lower right hand corner it says 8-bit. Your stronger models, like the mini bosses, are going to say 16-bit on them. If I get the camera to focus here, you'll see 16-bit for the more powerful mini bosses. And finally, for the dungeon boss, you're going to see the word super on the bottom of the card. And what this means is that the console player cannot spawn that kind of creature until the power meters reach that point. So until the power meters reach the 16-bit point, the only thing that the console player can spawn on their turn are minions. Once they reach 16-bit, they can start spawning mini bosses, or if you're playing a quick game, you can actually spawn the weaker dungeon boss if you're playing the quick game, which is 8-bit level. If you're playing the standard 16-bit, you have to go all the way up to super, and once that has occurred, the dungeon boss spawns and starts the final battle for the game. You also notice there are skulls on the board at various locations across the board. Every time the power meter passes one of these skulls, the console player is going to get a skull token that they can spend on their turn to help them spawn other mobs on their turn. And the only other thing to understand about the Ludometer right here is Super Dungeon Explorer is played over rounds. Each round is broken down into turns, and I'll explain why that makes a big difference when I get to actually explain the models for the game. Just know at the end of every round, the loot meter is going to reset to 0 no matter where it is. If it makes all the way up to here and you get to the end of the round, you're not going to get to that last loot space, and this is going to reset all the way to the beginning. And if you manage to make it all the way up to here, it's not going to advance anymore. But once the end of the round is reached, this is going to reset all the way back to the beginning. The power gauge never resets. It's always going to keep marching along its track until it gets to the end. And if you're playing the Super Dungeon version of the game, the big 3-hour version where you're using a large board, you actually have to run this track twice to spawn the final boss. In Super Dungeon Explorer, one player is going to take the role of the console, which controls all the bad guys for the game, and the remaining players are going to split up the heroes among them. So in a 2-player game, one person is going to control the bad guys, one person will control all the heroes. In a 5-player game, or correction, a 6-player game, for example, one person would control the bad guys, and the remaining 5 players would control one hero apiece. Super Dungeon Explorer is played over rounds. Every round is broken up into turns. On a turn, one hero is going to take their turn, and they're going to perform all their actions that they're allowed. Once that one hero has taken their turn, The console player is then going to get to activate up to 4 skulls worth of creatures. Now, what are skulls, you may be asking? Well, every creature card for every model that the console controls is going to have some symbols on it, giving them a whole bunch of different statistics. The important statistic we're going to talk about right now is the skull, which is right here next to the heart, and hearts are for lives. The skull is how many skulls it takes, or this creature takes, to activate on a turn. This creature takes 1 skull to activate. Some creatures will take 2 skulls to activate, such as the Wyrmling. And finally, some of the tougher creatures, such as Rex, one of the mini-bosses, he takes 4 skulls to activate. So what's going to happen is the hero is going to activate their hero, then the console is going to activate up to 4 skulls worth of creatures. So if the console decides to activate Rex on his turn, not on the round, but on his turn, that would be his activation for his turn, as opposed to if he activated a Wyrmling, a hatchling, that'd be a 1 skull creature, then he can activate another hatchling, and he still have 2 skulls of activation worth left, and he can spend those last 2 activations to activate one of his Wyrmlings. That'd be a total of 4 skulls worth of activations. Once that is done, another hero who has not taken the turn is going to activate and perform all their actions. After that hero is activated, the console is again going to get to activate up to 4 skulls worth of creatures. They cannot activate any creatures that have already been activated on this round, so they must pick 4 skulls worth of creatures that have not been activated. Whether that's another dragon type creature that's worth 2, or a whole bunch of minions that are only worth 1 skull apiece, they're going to activate up to 4 skulls worth of creatures, and then their turn is going to be over, and then another hero is going to activate and take their turn. This is going to go back and forth until all the heroes and all the console creatures have activated. Once that is done, you have completed a full round. The round is going to end, and you're going to start a new round, which is going to start with the console spawning more mobs out of the spawning locations on the board. And the console is going to get to spawn up to 4 skulls worth of creatures out of every spawning point that remains on the board. So the console has 3 spawners currently on the large game board. They would be able to spawn a total of 12 skulls worth of creatures, 4 out of every spawner that's left on the board. If they lose one of their spawners, they can now only spawn 8 skulls worth of creatures on their turn, 4 per spawning point. And again, each 4 has to come from that. You can't do like all 8 out of this spawner and 0 out of this. It's 4 out of each. And the heroes manage to take out another spawner. The console is only going to be able to spawn 4 skulls worth of creatures on their turn, making it very important for the heroes to work as quickly as they can to destroy all the spawners, which is going to do 2 things. One, it's going to stop the console from spawning a lot of creatures on its turn, and once all the spawners have been removed from the board, the final boss is going to spawn on the board, starting the final battle for the game. I'll take a few moments to explain the cards that come with each model. Once you understand, there's not much left to the game besides movement, combat, and equipment to explain to you, so I'll try to make this really quick. Every single model in the game is going to come with a card that has all their statistics on it. Every model gets one of these cards, and they're going to have a name for the model. They're going to have their statistics and how many dice and what color dice they're rolling whenever they're making one of these statistic checks. For example, every time the barbarian is attacking, as long as they don't have any equipment making them more powerful, they're going to roll 2 red dice every time they attack. Every time they're making an armor check, which is for defense, they're going to roll 3 blue dice. Every time they make a will check, it's going to be 2 blue dice. Every time they make a dexterity check, it's going to be 2 blue dice. Now, attack is generally for melee attacks or reach attacks, which is such as a spear or something like that. Allows you to attack 2 squares away or something along those lines. Armor is going to be for defense. You have to roll more stars with this many dice than your attacker did, otherwise you're going to take 1 point of damage. Will is used for initiative and also for spell casting. And finally, dexterity is going to be used for missile attacks, which is basically for the ranger or other ranged casters. The other thing you're going to see is how many hearts this hero has. Once all their hearts are gone, that model is defeated. This game does have player elimination, so if you're having multiple players control the heroes and their model is defeated, they are out of the game. Luckily, there are a couple resurrection charms in the treasure deck. They're pretty hard to come by those, so you want to avoid losing all your hearts. The other thing you're going to see is a potion number. This is the maximum amount of potions this hero can carry. Most models can only carry one, some can actually carry two, especially the spellcasters. Below you're going to see a couple special abilities that are always active for this model, and most of these special abilities will be explained on the back of the card. It would take me quite a while to explain all the special abilities that all the heroes get, so before you start playing the game for your first time, I recommend you take all the hero cards out, look up all their special abilities, flip them all over, and read and understand exactly how all these special abilities work. They make a big difference, especially with your strategy when you're playing the game. Up here at the top, you're going to see what looks like a thumb pad with a number sign on it, and next to it you're going to see what looks like a button from a Nintendo controller with another number on top of it. The one that looks like a thumb pad is how many squares you can move on the board, and diagonal movement is allowed in this game. And the other thing is how many actions this model can take on its turn. I'm going to go ahead and explain movement because movement's kind of interesting in this game. When you perform your movement, understand that movement does not take up an action on your turn. No matter what, if somehow you lose some of your actions on your turn, you can still move up to your full movement unless something is giving you some kind of effect that prevents you from moving. The interesting thing about movement in this game is that you can actually interrupt your movement to perform an action and then continue moving. So for example, with this barbarian, you can move one space, use an action to make an attack, and if you're lucky enough to defeat this model, you can spend another movement for a total of only 2 movement. Remember, you get 6 movement for this model. Spend another action to make another attack, and if you knock this model out, you can move 1, 2, 3, 4 more spaces. And if you somehow you had a piece of equipment that gave you a reach of 2, you can spend your third action to actually attack this creature. Now it's really important, and a lot of things, and that's something that may seem different to a lot of people who are used to more dungeon crawl games where you move and attack, or attack and then move. This game is a little bit different. It's a very important distinction that you interrupt your movement to perform an action at any time during your turn. The other thing you have is you have how many actions this hero can perform on a turn. A standard attack using your attack statistic usually uses only 1 action, but every hero has a set of special abilities. Now there's 2 different kinds of special abilities. There's a red special ability, and there's also a blue special ability, such as the Paladin will have. And you'll see the Paladin has a blue ability called Iron Halo right there. Now the difference between a blue ability and a red ability is that a red ability is going to require you to make an attack roll for the ability to work, whereas in a blue ability it's just going to cost you the amount of actions listed in the circle, and then the ability is automatically going to fire off. So for example, the Royal Paladin gets 3 actions on his turn. He can spend 1 action to automatically activate Iron Halo, and it goes into effect, no roll is required. Or the Paladin can spend 2 actions and do a smite attack, which is actually going to cost them 2 actions to perform, and then they have to make a successful attack. So red must successfully attack, blue spend the actions and it automatically goes off. The final thing you're going to see at the bottom here is it's going to tell you what effect this hero's potions create. Now the interesting thing here is that while this hero creates the potion, any hero can actually use that potion on their turn. So for example, if this hero has a potion, they can discard this potion token, and that potion can be used on this hero even though he doesn't have the ability of that potion. It's kind of an interesting thing, but again, remember this game is based on 16-bit games where all the heroes had one inventory screen that all the heroes can use from. So kind of think about 16-bit and that'll make a lot more sense. It's one inventory shared by the entire party, but there's only so many potions that each hero can carry. So the Paladin could, if they had one of their potions, they could discard their potion for the Barbarian to use the Paladin's potion abilities. I know it sounds confusing, but it's a very important distinction. Potions are very powerful. They can be used on any hero's turn. Even if it's not the hero's turn, they can also be used on the console's turn. That's a very important thing to remember, especially with the healing potions. If the console comes up and rolls to attack, and before you roll your defense dice, you can actually spend a potion. For example, the Riffling Rogue has a teleport potion. they can use their potion, discard it, and a model that was about to be attacked, even though it's not the Riftling rogue, can use the rogue's potion to teleport away, so that complete attack was just wasted because they disappear before they even had to roll defense dice. Seems kind of confusing, but it does add to the strategy, and make sure you understand that potions can be used at any time during the game. Just take a quick moment to go ahead and show you combat and finally how equipment works, and then I think you're going to be ready to watch a sample game of Super Dungeon Explorer. Combat is pretty quick and easy. I'm going to go ahead and show you the Barbarian performing combat. Now remember, the Barbarian starts off with an attack of 2 red dice, so every time the Barbarian attacks they're going to get to roll 2 dice. And we'll say the Barbarians here will have a dragon there, and then we'll have a Dragon Priest right here. Now if you look at the Dragon Priest, you'll see that his armor stat is 1 red and 1 blue on defense. And you'll see that the Whelp just has what looks like a gray die with a number 1 on it. That means the Whelp actually doesn't get to roll defense dice. All I have to do is roll 2 stars or more, and I'm going to automatically hit and do damage to the Whelp. So gray die means a set statistic. Blue, red, or green means you're going to roll the dice. It's going to be the Barbarian's turn. Remember, the Barbarian gets a 6 move and 3 actions and rolls 2 red dice. Barbarian will move 1 square. Diagonal attacking is perfectly fine as long as you have line of sight, and you always have a line of sight to an adjacent mob unless something's preventing, like some kind of special ability. Simply roll 2 dice. The Whelp only has an armor of 1 gray die. We rolled 1 star plus 2 star, 3 stars. That's going to do 1 point of damage. Now I may have skipped over this, but in Super Dungeon Explorer, all models, if they hit, they only do 1 point of damage no matter how many stars they roll, unless they use a special ability that allows them to do more than 1 point of damage. And there are some abilities that allow you to do 1 extra point of damage, but on average you're only going to do 1 point of damage on a hit. So these 3 stars would be more than enough to beat the Whelp's armor. The Whelp would be defeated. We've only moved 1 space. We're going to move an additional space. We have 4 movement left and 2 actions left. We're going to go ahead and attack the Dragon Priest. We're going to roll 2 red dice. And that's going to be a miss. Let me just go ahead and re-roll it so you can see what it would really look like. We'll get 3 stars. The Dragon Priest will roll a blue and a red, and they will get 3 stars. Now defenders win ties, so the Dragon Priest is going to take no damage. And this also means that if we were tracking on the loot board, the loot meter would not advance and the power gauge would not advance because we did not do any damage there. But since we did defeat the prior Wyrmling Whelp, we would have advanced that 1, and the power gauge would have advanced 1 also. We still have 1 action left. We're going to go ahead and attack one more time. We're going to get 4 stars. Dragon is going to roll 2 stars. 4 is greater than 2. The Dragon Priest is going to take 1 heart of damage. We'll simply put that on the card. And you'll note that the Dragon Priest does have 3 hearts. So the Dragon Priest is not defeated. They're still alive. They can still take 2 more points of damage. And on the trackers, we would simply advance the loot meter 1 more time. And the power gauge would also advance 1 more square. That's pretty much how combat works. There may be special abilities or status effects such as fire, weakness, cold, and those are going to have long-lasting effects. I don't want to drag this video on too much. Just know that there are interesting status effects you can cause to your enemies to increase the strategic abilities of your heroes, and also for the console player. And finally, we're going to come down to equipment, go over equipment with you really quickly, and once you see this, you're going to pretty much understand how most of the game plays. We're going to go ahead and use the Paladin as our sample for how equipment works. There are 4 sides to every hero card. You're going to notice there's gems on each side. Those gems happen to match up with the colors of equipment. Green for a green gem, blue equipment for a blue gem, yellow equipment for a yellow gem, and finally treasure cards, which are your red equipment cards. Now all these item cards simply slide underneath your hero card to equip them. You know, simply just slide them under, and I say simply as it's going to fight me every step of the way because I sleeve my cards here, but Do this really quick. And you'll see that the equipment, just the pertinent information sticks out on each side. You can only have one piece of equipment on each equipment slot, and these pieces of equipment are going to permanently modify your base statistics. For example, this item is going to give you +1 green dice when you make any kind of dex check, so this is a great item for a ranger type character. This item is going to give you +1 blue die every time you attack, so the paladin starts with 3 blue dice. If they have this item equipped, they're going to gain 1 more blue die. This item is going to give them +1 to dex, so they get 1 more blue die in dex checks. This item is going to give them 1 more blue die on all attacks. So every time this paladin attacks with this equipment, he's going to roll all 5 blue dice. He's going to add up all the stars and any hearts he's going to get, and if he's successful with his attack, he'll get to take those hearts and spend them for healing. Equipment is also going to give additional special effects to each character occasionally. And it's going to be listed right here in small text right here on the card. You'll see it says Pacify. Pacify is a status effect, and every time a hero with this item equipped hits another model, it's going to affect pacifying that target. And Pacify basically prevents them from using special abilities. If you have equipment that has these special abilities on them, it's going to be in addition to your attack. So if this paladin were to use his smite attack for 2 actions, his target, if he successfully hits it, is going to be pacified. They're also going to be knocked down, and they're also going to be set on fire. So all these special abilities are cumulative, making the strategy of the game to get the most efficient equipment on your heroes so they can most effectively attack the console. This is a good example of why Dex is not a really good statistic for the Paladin, because he doesn't use any missile attacks. So this is a great item to be on the Ranger, and same with this item, which adds Dex. Now it's not totally useless, but you want to get equipment on the heroes who can use them best. Now you can only have one piece of equipment equipped per slot. So if somehow you got an additional item with a slot that you can't equip, you have 2 options. One, you can always give it to another hero who may actually have an open green slot. Or if that piece of equipment is not efficient for any models, or it's just not a piece of equipment you want to have equipped, you can take any loot card and discard it for the power of 1 heart. And the same thing goes for treasure cards, except that they can be discarded for the power of a potion. I think I've explained enough of Super Dungeon Explorer to give you a rough idea of how to play the game. Again, if you're going to learn how to play the game from scratch, I definitely recommend you download the version 1.5 of the rules. You're going to clean up really quick and set up the game for a 16-bit, which is 3 heroes versus the console.